All right, we're back here for the internal part, and I've opened up my earthworm for you. And I'm not going to demonstrate that step for you, but mainly it's with the scalpel, as you see right there. You hold it just like you would a pencil, just like this, and you just very, very carefully slice right along there. Scalpels are for cutting soft tissue, and you just barely even touch it. And that will help open that up. And then what I did is I took those dissecting pins and I peeled back the tissue very, very carefully. You can see those little stringy-like structures. That's going to be holding the skin to the internal parts of the earthworm, so you need to gently break through that. In this teasing needle right here can be a really good tool for that, or you can just use one of the dissecting pins itself. Notice that I put a pin right through the mouth segment on the anterior, the head end, just to hold it down, and then also I put another one just posterior to the clitellum, because remember, from that point on, all you're going to see is intestine, really, for the most part, which isn't all that thrilling. But in here, if we focus on some of these internal parts for just a moment, starting at the very anterior end of it, what we're going to have right in here is going to be our pharynx. That's kind of a muscular tissue that's going to squeeze food down the esophagus, which is located underneath here. And these dark rings that we have, if you count them all out, and they're covered a little bit here by this whitish structure, there are 5 of them. Those are your aortic arches, or your hearts. So remember, the earthworms have a closed circulatory system. The blood will stay within vessels. So those hearts or aortic arches pump it, travels throughout the entire earthworm. They need those 5 hearts because they're a pretty long creature. You got to get blood all the way to that far tail end of it. These whitish structures that are covering that, one of your first steps in the internal part will be to remove those. Those are reproductive organs. Those are your seminal vesicles that are making the male reproductive part of the earthworm. Remember, those external structures were located right in this region right here. Then if we go into the digestive system, we talked about the pharynx, and then running underneath those aortic arches is the esophagus, just like we have a food tube. It's going to run into this organ right here, which we would call the crop, and it kind of acts like our stomach a little bit by storing food, and they really have 2 organs that do the same thing that our stomach does. Next one is this more muscular structure, and when you touch it, it'll feel much different than the crop, and that's going to be your gizzard. You might have heard of those as being a part that birds are going to have, and it's going to be used to grind things up. So stores the food in the crop, grinds it up in the gizzard. Then from that point on, it's just going to be an intestine, a long tube running all the way to the end of the earthworm. You'll also notice this dark structure running right on top of that. That's going to be your dorsal blood vessel, so that hooks up with the aortic arches up here. If you see any gaps, like where the aortic arches are split in half or the blood vessels no longer connected, just means you got a little deep with the scalpel. Not a big concern. Typical 7th grader often cuts too deep. This one is kind of like your practice one in working with the scalpel. So if you make a mess out of it, come get me and I'll help you out as best I can. We'll try to patch it back together. Those are the main structures that you'll see inside of the earthworm. Cut nice and slowly, open up as you go. Notice the angle of the pins on how I've positioned those so that we can actually see what's going on in the inside. And remember, no screaming, and hopefully you learned something. We'll see you later.